Hi, today I wanted to have a live lecture, but I'm also going to be recording it through Camtasia. So this lecture will be recorded through both Big Blue Button on Canvas and Camtasia. So I wanted to start by first just kind of reviewing what we have uh, to finish by the end of the semester, and it's hard to believe it's coming up quick. It's actually it's about 4 weeks away, so it's really moving quickly. So the easy things that we can look at is we have our discussion board and we have our assignment 4, which you'll find under the discussion in the module that should be done. Our paper is due the 24th. So we have not next Monday, but the week after. And our presentation, which now I've coded over, is due the 1st of May. So maybe I'll just erase this here. So anyhow, the presentation is due the 1st of May. And once that's done, we will be doing a peer review of the presentations. So how I'm thinking of doing the final project is everybody will do their presentation, and their presentation should consist of an audio as well as visual. So if you'll take your report, you'll create either a PowerPoint or a Prezi or some type of multimedia, and then you'll add voice to it as well to explain. Let's keep it less than 7 minutes. Preferably 5 minutes, I think, is plenty, since in an online environment, that's all people generally want to listen to. Keep it about 5 minutes. And then I will put you into groups and you will provide feedback to your partner. And actually, you'll probably provide feedback to multiple people. So that's what is coming up. Today, we're going to have a class lecture on social media and how it impacts social engineering. And then lastly, if you have any issues or concerns, please let me know. So I see Daisy has joined. Hi, Daisy. How are you? So, all right. So continuing on, if there's no questions or concerns, these are the important dates, though, that you need to be aware of. Primarily the paper, the 24th, the presentation, the 1st, and then the peer review will be done on the 8th. And everything will be done remotely. If you run into a problem, because we have quite a few things due, if you have run into a problem where you can't get something done, just contact me, and I'm a very reasonable person, and we can work something out. This 5/8, though, and the paper date, those are hard dates. Can't change. But the assignment, for example, assignment 4, I can be flexible on that one. All right. With no further ado, let's continue on. So, social media attacks and why social engineering and why they work. Okay, so I don't know if you've been following any of the recent news about social media, but there's been a tremendous effort by social engineers to use social media, not only to find out the whereabouts of people, but they're actually looking at it to target specific industries. So most recently, as of November this past year, social engineering was used to target some strategic businesses, of which I've put 4 of them down here: Northrop Grumman, Airbus, Teledyne, and then Doosan, which is a Korean holding company. And what they did was they created fake accounts on LinkedIn where they created themselves to be recruiters. And what happened is they then targeted people who worked for either Northrop Grumman or one of these kind of companies. There were 8 in total. They targeted those companies to reach out and send emails to people in those companies. So just imagine you work for one of these companies. You work for a company, somebody reaches out to you and says, listen, we saw your resume. You look really great for a different job. I'm going to send you some information about this other job. They send you an email. You click on that email, and guess what? You have just downloaded a virus into your company's network. So this was just one example of a most recent use of social media and social engineering to do phishing and spear phishing in these companies. Another big social media company that's been in the news has been Twitter. And the issue with Twitter is that it turns out that there's 48 million, that's the estimate, 48 million accounts in Twitter that are just bots. So what better way to get out propaganda than to utilize these bots to, have followers, and people want to read things that everybody is following because it looks like it's the hottest thing ever. I mean, I've seen a couple of cat videos where they have thousands of followings. So you think, oh my goodness, you have to watch these. I thought they were dives. But anyhow, 40 million accounts. That's almost 15% of all the Twitter accounts are bots. 15%. And even Twitter said that that's probably 20,000 more than they expected. This was just released March 2017, so this is brand new. It was done done by University of Southern California, and Twitter came back and they said, well, there are some good reasons to have bots. It can alert people when there's a natural disaster and get news out quickly. But in reality, what USC came back is that it was the perfect vehicle for propaganda, manipulating elections, and recruiting terrorists. So social media is really a key component of social engineers, because what it does is it helps us to develop friends and develop trust with people. So for example, if you get a friend request from somebody and you don't know them, but they say, hey, I'm a mutual friend of somebody you don't really know actually if they are a mutual friend of that person unless you ask them, right? And we're busy, so we might not do that. And that person then might become friendly to you because you have something they want. So that's an important thing to keep in mind as we move through this lecture. You as a victim have something that the social engineer wants. And usually it's going to be asking some type of favor. A perfect example is you are a friend of somebody. They create some type of a story based upon information that they find in Facebook to say, yeah, we're friends. We both went to the same college together. We were in the same class, or something difficult to be able to trace. And they use this whole concept of befriending people to build up the other person's ego. Hey, yeah, he mentioned you, that he had a great time with you, or she had a great time with you. So you're more willing then to take somebody you had never met before and make them, quote, this friend that we have now in our online environment. And so why does social engineering even work? Well, it's because it triggers something emotional with us. I mean, it's a psychological tool. And whether it builds our ego, whether it makes us angry and we react, whatever the reason is, social engineering works because it gets an emotional response from us, the victim. And one thing that is really interesting is oftentimes it's this whole idea of counterfactual thinking, that we're thinking way too much about something, that it's so different than what we expected that we think that maybe it could be true because it's so different than what we expect. And oftentimes the victim is overloaded. Like somebody will then tell you 3 pieces of information, of which 2 of them are true, but the thing in the middle isn't. And so it's kind of like taking a multiple choice exam when it says, pick which ones are correct, and you see 2 things that look like they could be true, and you see all of the above, and you think, oh, these things, this one I know is true, this one might be true, it must be all of the above, and you pick that answer only to be surprised because you're overloaded with too much truth, and it's difficult to ascertain what's a false statement. And then reciprocation, where you want to do a favor for somebody because they asked you, especially at work. you want to help somebody get their job done at work just because you want to be a good guy. People, there's a philosophy that people generally want to be good people. They want to be that good guy. So one thing about social engineering is it obviously it's based upon a deceptive relationship. Excuse me. Deceptive relationship. For example, there was this perfect example about a guy who calls the IT help desk for a company, and the help desk helps him get through some kind of a problem. And then in the conversation, the guy says, "Hey, I'm selling my car." And the help desk guy says, "Wow, that sounds like a great car." And so then the guy says, "Listen, I'll send you a picture of my car." So the help desk individual gives them his email at work, and guess what happens? He clicks on the link, and bingo, he's just loaded malware onto his company's network. So this whole process is really, a deceptive relationship. It's building a relationship that really isn't true. I mean, there's a perfect example of letting people think that you're like them so that, people like other people who are more like them. It's just easier. And having that kind of relationship. But it's built on this concept of a deceptive relationship. And another reason social engineering works, it's because of a moral obligation. It's the social engineer is giving this scenario of, you are so important, you're going to make a decision that's going to actually save the company, because the company isn't seeing things the right way. And if you can give me this information, I can get this report out. And once I get this report out, it'll be very clear to the CFO that this is a bad decision to invest in this railroad. So it's, you're doing something great for the company by just giving me this shortcut. Or, you're saving my job. It's so important. You're helping me. You're doing something. Giving people this sense of it's a moral obligation to help their fellow worker. Another reason social engineering works is authority. People are conditioned to respond to people in authority. We do from the moment we're born. We respond to our parents as an authority, to a teacher as an authority, to our boss as an authority. So there was this perfect example of a test where a doctor who nurses did not know called in and said, "Give my patient a double the normal dose of what normally should be given to this patient." So they did this experiment with 22 nurses, and it was 95% of the time the nurses were willing to give the patient double the amount of medication they normally did. Another example is wire transfers. You get an email from the CFO and says, "I'm traveling to Thailand. I need money transferred into my account immediately. This is my wire number for this trip." This email is from the CFO. It must be real, right? It's the authority making it seem like that's the right thing to do. Okay, so how do we combat this social engineering? Because we see it's really going at this emotional level. It's going at something deeper, bigger than what we are. So we have what we call a multi-layered defense. And the first thing is that you, as the expert of social engineering, you help set up this multi-layered defense. You start with the perimeter layer, which is the employees and the managers. And the first thing you tell them is, the reason you are a potential victim for social engineering is because you know something that has value. And when we work for a company, we don't often think that. When I worked for Siemens, for example, and I had knowledge about new product releases or new integration between different pieces of equipment and integration about pieces of equipment that were going to be sunsetted, that information has value to competitors. So know that you have information that's value. And to remember that sometimes your friends are not always your friends. Oftentimes people are very opportunistic, and the social engineer is a very opportunistic individual looking looking to find weaknesses in others to be able to take advantage of them. And remembering passwords are personal. When somebody asks you for your password, you never provide them passwords. It's almost unbelievable with all of the technology that we have today, we're still relying on passwords that we set up. You know, we at least now have come to the point where you want your password to be greater than 8 letters, and you want it to have a complex password of numbers, letters, upper, lower case, and special characters. And lastly, uniforms are cheap. So somebody coming in as a technician, check to make sure they're really a technician. So train your staff as to what these things are. Really make sure that they're aware of them. And then the next thing is this resistance training. So when you think of resistance training, you think of, getting prepared. So the first thing is have an inoculation or have a mock trial so you can see how employees are going to handle it. People who hire social engineers to come into organizations, that's what they do. They test out the employees to see how they're going to react when they're asked for certain information. So do a mock trial. Have people prepare. Give them, what types of, a phone, a vishing opportunity is the best one. Run through different scenarios so that people become acquainted with real life examples, other than the IRS says that if you don't refile, you're going to get a fine. Knowing that there are so many opportunities for people to be a con man. I mean, social engineering, I believe, is just another fancy term for con people. Okay, forewarn people, prepare people that the social engineer is manipulative and they're going to use deceptive and insincere methods. And get people really prepared in that mindset that we don't want people to become everybody is a doomsday or everybody is an evil person. But in the same sense, we have to understand that when people come asking for information that doesn't follow the policies and the procedures within the company or the organization, they need to take a step back and ask, why are they doing this? And I think one of the most interesting parts is this reality check. Most people feel that they're smarter than any kind of social engineering attack. I mean, the IT help desk guy probably could not have imagined that after this building this relationship with this person who was needing help with IT, that he would click on a link for a car and only to find out that that was putting malware into his organization. So just making people aware that it happens to everybody. It doesn't mean you're stupid. And that's a real problem. People feel that that only, quote, stupid people get sucked into these social engineerings. Not true. Okay, so there's 3 stages of perceived risk that you want to make sure people understand. And if you come and you're doing social engineering at any organization, you want this, the first stage is awareness. You want people to know it's out there, that it's very difficult to really discern whether something is real or not, that it requires us to take a step back. And 2, that everyone is susceptible. It's out there and everyone is susceptible. And 3, it can happen to me. Getting that awareness to this general susceptibility to personal susceptibility is very important. And then once you have kind of built up this whole layer of training, resistance training, the perimeter, the resistance training, then you can kind of go into like continual reminders of ongoing reminders and telling people, making sure people know what's going on. If social engineering happens within your organization, you need to let people know. So ongoing reminders of these are the types of threats that are coming to our organization. And that's actually one of the weakest areas within organizations. They don't want to tell people, or that people are able to sometimes stop them before they become a problem, and then they don't let other people know, hey, this is happening. The best is like at Marymount is the IT saying, IT says IT systems are going through some change, so you need to change your password, and here is the link, and it's not even a Marymount link. So ongoing reminders. So what are some proactive policies to prevent social engineering. Set up some traps. Set up some traps so that somebody from the outside actually wants to try to get into your organization. Whether you leave some information available for people, but just setting up some traps. Because there's people who pretend they know it all. So those are the types of people who come into your organization and they look like they belong. Ask them, do you belong? Make that a policy that people need to ask others when they see them walking around. Are you supposed to be here? What is your badge? And then this whole security log, centralized security log. So we put it in one place so people can then know what's going on. And the step isn't just a security log now. The next step in social engineering is actually predictive in terms of you see this type of activity. This activity does not seem like it's quite right. Possibly something's happening. And this whole process IBM is using Watson for, where they look at behaviors and they say, this behavior doesn't seem quite like it should be. Let's do some digger deeping to see what's really going on. Because what's happening now is the DDoS attack of yesteryear. Yes, there's going to be those. But in reality, what happens is people are getting into the system and they're looking like they belong. So, keeping these logs is very important for predictive behavior. Setting up a policy where when people ask for a password reset, because a lot of times in organizations you have to call your IT, that you need to call them back and they need to be able to provide some types of authentication, whether it's a two-factor authentication or not. And verifying identities, asking key questions. Asking a question that's not true is another thing. So I'm sure we all have had where you have to do some kind of answer these questions and you're answering the question and then there's a question that isn't something that you would ask. That's another way to be able to verify identity. And the last thing here is don't react right away. So if somebody's calling about some kind of a password reset, put them on hold for a very short period of time. Because if they can't get the answers right away, then tell them you have to look something up to be able to get it. And a lot of times people who are doing something they're not supposed to do, they're not going to wait around. They're going to hang up. Okay. And then keeping track of everything and coding it so it's searchable. So coding it whether by the type of phishing or spear phishing, by the keywords that the social engineer used, so that you can start to track it. Maybe the voice, the method, whatever it might be, but keeping track of it so that you can search it, times, days, volume, etc. Social engineering and phishing and phishing attacks are very follow an actual pattern where they know that doing it at a certain, like 3 p.m, they're going to have a greater success than if they do it at 4:59 when somebody's going out the door. They're very scientific. They're looking into who are the people with the information, what their time schedules are, and when are the best times to reach those people. And lastly, be vigilant. It could happen to you. So I hope you have, these are my references. I used primarily the SANS organization study, and then I looked for updates on some of the information. But I hope you have found this to be useful. And remember that we have quite a bit of work that we have to do. And if you're running into any kind of issue, just let me know. Thanks so very much, and thank you for attending.